to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded. Later on, if you would like to have a copy of this recording, you just get in touch and we'll be able to forward you that. And so, hello, my name's Richard Harmel, and I have the pleasure this evening of being your host. We're living through some dramatic events and a lot of crises right now, and the Airport Marina Group hopes that everyone is doing as well as possible in these times and that you're managing to cope. As a resident of Marina del Rey, I wish to acknowledge our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. I wish to acknowledge the Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of Tavangar, and that's a region that includes the Los Angeles Basin and South Channel Islands. I ask that we pay our respects to Tongva ancestors, elders, relatives, and relations past, present, and emerging. So some housekeeping before we begin with the introduction of our guests for this evening's presentation, entitled Preserving the Quality of Life in Our Communities. I'd like to advise you that this meeting is being recorded, which I already did. And during tonight's presentation, everyone will be muted until sometime toward the end of the talks, when we'll unmute everyone for a chance to engage directly with the presenters. In the meantime, if you have questions, please open the chat function and enter them there. Please indicate who your question is for, and questions will be fielded and then offered to the speakers. We're going to ask each speaker to talk for about 10 minutes. Council Member Koretz, you'll kick things off with your talk, and then Jill, you'll follow him with a short talk as well. We're going to then circle back to Council Member Koretz so that he can respond to questions and deal with any major concerns. And after that, Jill is going to offer a brief PowerPoint slideshow. At that point, we're going to unmute everyone for an informal conversation. However, we ask that unless you're speaking, you keep your mute function on. We ask that all audience members keep your remarks and questions to under 2 minutes. As you can see, if you open the chat feed, I've already pasted links to the SB 9 and SB 10 council files, as well as 2 links to Livable California. So all of that said, I'd like to offer a warm welcome to our 2 distinguished presenters this evening. Council Member Koretz, we're so happy that you're here. A little bio information. Council Member Koretz currently serves on the LA City Council, where he champions environmental protection, including fighting climate change, conserving water, and protecting our natural resources. Council Member Koretz is leading the fight against mansionization and working hard to solve our city's longtime homelessness problem. He also created a program for greater enforcement of quality of life issues and authored several laws to protect animals from cruel practices. He's worked hard to pave our streets, trim our trees, and improve our parks. During his years of elected service, Council Member Koretz has always delivered on his commitment to government efficiency, transparency, accountability, and accessibility, principles that have guided his life of activism, service, and leadership. Next, Jill Stewart. Welcome back, Jill. Jill Stewart is a journalist and environmentalist who helps host Livable California's teleconferences, and she's a Sierra Club member. Interesting to note, nearly 1 year ago to this day, Jill put together a talk on Bayona and the science of carbon sequestration for our February 2020 Airport Marina Group meeting. And that, Jill, was an eye-opening introduction to soil and subsoil systems in Bayona that certainly sent me off on a new path, and I've learned a lot about that thanks to your presentation. So thank you very much. So once again, thank you very much for joining us tonight. There's one more character I'd like to introduce this evening who is not present, and that's the organization Livable California. I suspect that many of you are familiar with Livable California. Their mission is that they're a nonprofit that advocates for empowerment of local governments to foster equitable, livable communities and truly affordable housing. It's a statewide, nonpartisan group, including elected officials, nonprofit organization leaders, and individuals. They believe in community, equity, and action. And some of their principles include support housing as a basic right, fight for truly affordable housing, assure self-determination of local government, preserve quality of life in our communities, achieve smart and balanced growth, respect lifestyle choices, protect home ownership, and value the American dream. So, Council Member Koretz, with that, would you please take it away?
Oh, I certainly will. And thank you, Richard, for the introduction. And I hope everyone is doing well during these crazy times. I'm happy to join you virtually, my fellow members of the Sierra Club, to discuss SB 9 and 10 and why I'm in opposition to both in defense of our neighborhoods, affordable housing, and the environment. In my view, this is a fight for local control against proposed giveaways to market rate developers by the state of California. This fight is to preserve the very urban fabric of our communities. It's a fight against gentrification and a fight to preserve generational wealth. It's a fight to prioritize affordable housing over luxury building in order to produce and preserve units for Californians of all incomes. And lastly, it's a fight to preserve the process of the California Environmental Quality Act so that environmental impacts are disclosed before decisions are made. In my view, we're fighting against one man's unrealistic utopian views that he wants to impose upon all Californians. Senator Scott Wiener believes and argues that single-family home neighborhoods with trees and lawns are immoral, and that if we scatter much denser luxury market rate residential units throughout every such neighborhood, all will be right with the world in California. And as we saw in the fight against SB 50 in 2019 and a package of 9 related bills in 2020, especially SB 1120, the associated marketing mythology for SB 9 and 10 will cause confusion and false assumptions. In reality, most cities and counties, especially in Los Angeles, are in dire need of more affordable housing. But I can tell you that consistently these bills miss that mark in obvious ways and will only lead to less affordable housing and more luxury housing. SB 9 and 10 focus on producing market rate units, in contradiction to the real need for affordable housing and in contradiction to the vast majority of California's locally adopted general plans and housing elements, which contain detailed goals, policies, objectives, and programs crafted by our local governments to guide the development of very low, and moderate housing production. This while degrading our communities with substandard design and infrastructure, as well as inadvertently reducing protections for protected and desirable trees, potentially historic buildings, threatened species, and so many other assets in our communities by removing the CEQA process. I believe that state control of local zoning undermines not only the integrity of cities and counties, but strips residents of their ability to engage in a meaningful planning and community building process. And at the local level, we understand the politics of proximity. Land use is a local issue. The closer you are to a project, the more you may become concerned. Move away from the project, those impacts seem to be less important. Move far enough away, such as Sacramento, and all one sees are the hypothetical benefits. Some of our state lawmakers think that homeowners and the elected leaders of our 482 cities and 58 counties are just trying to block the development of new housing. I think they need to stop blaming us and take a look at themselves. State regulations filled with unfunded mandates and endlessly lengthy and expensive and complex processes prevent local innovation in the realm of housing production. In order to simply keep our plans current in Los Angeles, we now have the largest planning department in the nation. And if you ask any planner, they'll tell you stories of the time spent endlessly researching state laws in order to ensure compliance with even the simplest and most straightforward changes in a proposed plan. And at the same time, local planners struggle to build consensus and update plans as they explain the new realities of land use law to community members who stand appalled and in disbelief by state rules that were adopted without their input. Usurping local control means grassroots solutions are not given an opportunity to take hold, as they're snuffed out by state rules. We must respect very varied ways of life and have a place for everyone. Let our residents and our local governments decide what should be by right and what should be discretionary. In LA, we have a wide and diverse city with plenty of room for infill development, with a range of affordable units that doesn't displace stable single-family neighborhoods. And at the same time, we don't need to force our single-family communities to give up their way of life and their unique character. Many other opportunities to grow exist without the senseless and hostile disruption that would result from these bills if they become law. In Los Angeles, our currently adopted housing element proves that we have the capacity and can add to our housing stock with minimal displacement if development is focused on centers and along major corridors. As our economy recovers and evolves, we'll continue to see obsolete commercial buildings and malls being reused, providing ample opportunity for new growth without displacement. And for example, I recently introduced a motion to expand adaptive reuse in the city to ensure that units will be affordable for moderate income households instead of just producing market rate luxury units. My motion will go through the process so we can perfect this concept by including stakeholder participation, understand the environmental impacts, and make sure that any proposed ordinance meets the needs and respects the aspirations of our various communities and the built environment. So what could occur if these bills passed? Senate President Atkins' SB 9 is a copycat of last year's SB 1120. It overrides local development standards, public participation, and forces jurisdictions to approve substandard lots. You'll see reduced yards and reduced separation between structures, less light and air, and looming buildings. The additional units on the lots will have a crowded and unbalanced site plan, guided not by local regulation, but by pro forma. The result will be a pattern of development that our state previously defined as blight. And lastly, a CEQA requires a local agency to prepare and certify the completion of an environmental impact report on a proposed project that may have a significant impact on the environment. It's worth noting that CEQA does not apply to the approval of ministerial projects, thereby exempting the approval of projects from the environmental review process. Additionally, SB 9 would remove public participation and the intergovernmental coordination required by CEQA and the Coastal Act. It would exempt local governments from being required to hold public hearings for coastal development permit applications for housing developments and urban lot splits pursuant to the bill's provisions. And then there's SB 10, which Senator Wiener says provides cities with a powerful, fast, and effective tool to allow light touch density exactly where it should be, near jobs, near public transportation, and in existing urban areas. SB 10 will help move California away from a sprawl-based housing policy and toward a more sustainable, equitable, and effective housing policy. So that's what he says about his bill. But what Senator Wiener doesn't tell you is that SB 10 will allow cities to ignore the general plan of a city or county. The general plan is both a constitutional requirement and a living document created with extensive community outreach and environmental study to build a consensus about how a community will grow. It's a myth to think that general plans are static and inflexible. Rather, they ensure orderly development and commensurate infrastructure. This bill creates inconsistency between the general plan and zoning. And in addition to removing environmental review, the result will be blight, environmental degradation, and lost opportunities of generational wealth for Californians, as land title is passed from homeowners to developers and real estate syndicates, and as single-family homes are replaced with small apartment buildings over 5 units that can only be financed as commercial properties. If we want to meet our greenhouse gas goals, we need to place affordable housing next to transit. A 2018 Metro survey of bus riders found that just 12% of passengers had a household income greater than $50,000, and 60% of riders had an income below $20,000. SB 10 doesn't require affordable housing within half a mile of transit. It builds luxury housing near transit for people that will never take transit. And while the preamble of SB 10 alludes to affordable housing production and finds that, quote, enduring adequate production of affordable housing is a matter of statewide concern and not a municipal affair, unquote, no provision of the bill sets aside affordable housing. In my view, clearly the constituency of both SB 9 and 10 are market rate developers who are uninterested in utilizing the existing affordable housing programs, such as the density bonus provisions of that law. In 2020, SB 1120 missed passing by a hair, literally passing at midnight on the last day and not leaving time to be transmitted from one house to the other. This was partly because everyone, including myself, was appropriately focused on COVID, law enforcement reform, homelessness, and our economic disaster, all of which we still face. But in 2021, I'm not letting these bills out of my sight, and I'm in front and leading our city to ensure that we're clear about what these bills do. I want to remind you that Senator Scott Wiener just doesn't and won't take the hint that his housing ideas are wrong for California. It's terrible for LA, but even his hometown of San Francisco hates them as well. For example, regarding SB 50, according to his own Twitter feed from December 17th, 2019, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors just voted again to oppose SB 50. The board has now voted to oppose it not once, not twice, but 3 times. We get it, you don't like it. Well, for some reason, Scott keeps recycling the same bad ideas, and I want to get the point across to state legislators that we are not ignoring the real problems. We're trying to address them, but these bills and destroying neighborhoods are not the answer. We have 40,000 homeless people in the city of Los Angeles, and building luxury units will not trickle down to the homeless in Los Angeles and make housing affordable. Building affordable housing will, which should be our real goal and the direction that I would like to see these bills go in, instead of just being the giveaway to developers that they are. I hope Sierra Club members will take a good look at these bills and that the Sierra Club will oppose them. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councilmember Koretz. We appreciate your input and information on this issue. Jill, would you like to take the floor?
Yeah, so Paul said everything that I was going to say. So I'm going to go, everything he said was right on target. If I were writing a story, I could just quote it directly. I'm just going to go straight to my screen sharing of my PowerPoint. It's a fairly painless PowerPoint. And I'm just going to walk through what Paul just said, except in some visuals with some bullet items and so on. So if you don't mind, folks, I'm going to hit screen share, and I'm going to bring in my PowerPoint. Can you see it? Okay.
We got it.
Okay, you can see it. Okay, good. So is it in the middle? Can everybody, is it in the right spot on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So SB 9, as Paul said, it's a copycat of SB 1120. It kills single-family zoning in California. There's nothing like it in the nation. Oregon is the only state to approve wipe out single-family zoning with duplexes. But in fact, California beat them when they allowed the ADUs 2 years ago. California was in fact the very first state to go statewide with ending single-family zoning by allowing ADUs almost everywhere. Those are granny flats. Oregon is just now going for that. They're calling them duplexes, and they started about 5 weeks ago, their new law. They're going to put it in phases. Nobody knows how it's going to turn out. I have heard legislators tell me to my face that Oregon's duplex program is going incredibly well and is a huge success. Well, it just started, and that's not true. Nobody knows. So you got to be careful. You got to be careful when these things come up. Okay, so SB 9 upzones all single family lots, and you'll see on this page some yellow highlighting because about 2 hours ago, I got an email from a top attorney in California who has found some new wording, some kind of not new wording, but unnoticed wording in SB 9 that he says allows 10 units instead of 8 units. Most of the media are covering it as a duplex bill. This is not true. The media are just overwhelmed. They don't have time. They hear from somebody, usually Scott Wiener and Tony Atkins, that it's duplexes, and that's what they report. So it allows up to 10, as I understand it now. There are different scenarios where you can do 4 or 6 or 8 units where one single family home is now. The yards will be wiped out. The setback is only 4 feet required, so permeable soil, all of that gone. You can do the 4 and 6 unit projects by right. That's that second bullet item. The 8 unit projects are, the cities have a certain amount of leeway. We can't really figure out how that's going to be interpreted by the legislature, but it allows the cities to step in and say, okay, 8 is too many. You got to go back and do one of the other ones. I don't know what the rules are for the 10 unit because we're just now deciphering. We didn't know about the 10 units. It's brand new information. As Paul said on my bullet 4, it's a gift to market rate rental giants to overrun homeowner areas. Millions of Californians need affordable housing, and SB 9 does not require any of the new units put into neighborhoods and wiping out single family. None of them need to be affordable. They can all be market rate or luxury. SB 9 at the very bottom ends public hearings for multiple homes on single family lots in the coastal zones. So those hearings are not going to happen. The coastal zones are just considered regular land and it's nothing special. So that's really a big blow, I think. Next slide. It's being sold as a duplex bill. And that almost worked in 2020. One of the reasons Paul mentioned that the bill almost passed, and it passed on the assembly side a couple minutes before midnight on August 31st. And I was watching, it was really very dramatic, even though it was very wonky. It was very dramatic. And there was only like 4 minutes to go. And some lobbyist said, well, they have the votes, but we've got the clock. And I didn't know what that meant. What does that mean, we've got the clock? And he said, well, they can't get it across the hall fast enough to the Senate side to get it approved. There's only 4 minutes left. So we're going to win on the clock. And I've covered Sacramento for years. And I just, Paul knows that stuff because he used to be in the assembly, but I didn't know. So it was really amazing when they wiped it out by Some people were talking really slow when they got the microphone and they ran down the clock. That's what happened. So there's 3 scenarios under this bill, and I believe now we're going to find out about a 4th scenario allowing 10 units. One of them results in 4 units where one home is now. That's because it goes hand in hand with our granny flat laws. This bill is not a standalone bill. It builds on the granny flats already allowed. Everything already allowed plus this. That's how you have to think about it. That's why the media are so confused, and almost all of the stories I don't think I've seen an accurate story yet. Scenario 2 allows 6 units. Again, the ADUs play a very key role in what's called, I don't know if you pronounce it JDU. Paul, how do you pronounce that? It's the junior accessory dwelling units. Is it?
Hey, I've never said the word, so I
Okay.
don't recall that.
I don't know how to say it, but it's ADUs, and then is it JDU? I don't know. Then the third one results in 8 units where one home is now, and that's the one where the cities can come in and go, well, we're not so sure. But we can't tell from the wording in the bill, is this, it's not hearings, and it doesn't allow any neighborhood input, but is it over the counter, like case by case, or how are they going to do that? We don't know. Now, as I said, we just learned about the horrible possibility of 10 units. Now, what's that going to look like? Well, Redondo Beach had an interesting situation about 30 years ago where they were rezoning their city, and the developers found out that they were changing the zoning and came in and built what are called this tall and skinnies. And you can see them from Google Earth right here. They're 4plexes on 1,200 square feet of land, and they have a garage in front, and they wipe out virtually all. There's a little tiny, you can see a little tiny backyard behind some of them with a few trees. Now, this bill is far more dense than that. It's far more dense. These are 4 units. This bill allows 6, 8, or 10 units. The lots can be as small as 1,200 square feet. So it wipes out all greenery. It wipes out all yards. It's a paving over of whatever streets developers most want to go after, because it's allowed everywhere. Okay, I just thought a visual is, it always blows me away. Okay, now the media, how did this happen? How did they not understand that it wasn't a duplex bill? Look at the stories. LA Times allows a duplex. San Francisco Chronicle allows the people to split lots and convert their homes into duplexes. San Diego Union Tribune allows duplexes. Cal Matters, which is a wonky bunch of planners who write stuff. These were planners who wrote this, who got snookered by the wording, allows duplexes. And The Real Deal allows duplexes. Last week, New York Times op-ed by Ezra Klein called it a modest duplex bill. So they've had a whole year now of phone calls and letters to the editor and people trying to wake them up, and they are absolutely addicted to this misreporting of the bill. We're going to have to work on it hard this year, folks, to get them to understand. Let's at least have a debate over what the bill really is going to do instead of this false narrative, which I have to give Wiener credit for. He called it a duplex bill at every possibility, and it was picked up by the media. Okay, and then Paul went into the second bad bill this year, the other worst bill. It's SB 10 by Wiener, and last year it was SB 902. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what it does to the right to voter initiative. It's a 108-year-old constitutional right that we can put things on the ballot by gathering signatures, and we can pass laws, and no city council can overturn what we do. This bill allows any municipality, that would be any county supervisors or any city, to nullify city initiative, voter-approved laws that protect land from developers in any form, whatever it is. If it's a height limit, if it's protection of a shoreline, hills, canyons, urban boundaries, open space, anything that voters have approved. And you'll see my second bullet item. I did a quick search of maybe 4 or 5 hours one day and found 40 such protections in California just in the last couple of decades. There are probably many that go back to the 40s and 50s and 60s that are long-standing protections of canyons and shorelines and so on. This puts them all at risk. And of course, as a journalist, my first thought was, oh my God, what's going to happen is developers are going to start funding city council races in cities that have small councils, like 5 or 7 members, and quickly turn them into majority developer controlled and undo all of these voter initiatives. I mean, it's one of the worst ideas I have ever seen in a bill. It got no coverage last year, but it's back. So the second part, it's a 2-part bill, and it's SB 10. It also allows what Paul was talking about, 10-unit market rate projects almost everywhere. And this brings in an issue that I know is at the deep heart of Sierra Club, and that is urban infill. They don't identify what they mean by urban infill in the bill, but I did some searching as to what the state has been interpreting as urban infill, and they call it underutilized land. It can't be industrial and it can't be agricultural, but it can be underutilized land. Well, you've all been involved in battles in Los Angeles over what is underutilized land, because the city is allowing housing to be torn down to build new housing. Hollywood is a hotbed of battles over trying to save housing from new luxury housing with often fewer affordable units than are going to be wiped out. Those were called underutilized, and that was one of the big arguments. So when we come to a word, kind of a phrase of art, such as urban infill, that should scare everyone. That is going to be abused incredibly if this law goes through. The second, and the only one in that list that makes any sense that you can actually identify what it will do is the transit rich area, because they define it 1/2 mile, which Paul already mentioned, 1/2 mile from heavy transit pickup areas. Jobs rich is another kind of a phrase of art that is going to scare you when I tell you what they're going to do. A state entity, a board of people, are going to sit down and decide the building that you're proposing, this 10-unit building you're proposing on land that's only a single family zoning, for example. Will the people who move into it have shorter commutes than they have right now? That's what the state is going to be deciding. The state is not capable of figuring that out. Nobody can figure that out. But they're going to use this magical wand, and they're going to decide this building should be allowed because the people who move into it are going to have a shorter commute than if they didn't move into it. It's like some kind of a nightmare. I mean, there's no way the state, which can't even get unemployment checks out, can figure out something at that level. It's completely impossible. A city council wouldn't be able to either, and they're closer to the ground. So this is a really bad bill. Moving on to the next. Okay, will we let California be the next Vancouver? Livable California last week had Professor Patrick Condon from the University of British Columbia as its key speaker. We had a huge crowd of people show up. He was a major backer of the very sort of upzoning we're talking about in SB 9 and SB 10. He fought for it for years in Vancouver, and they upzoned a huge amount of Vancouver. And Vancouver essentially no longer has single family zoning. There is some, but it's been overrun by all kinds of multiple units. And the argument that Professor Condon made, and all of them made, they were about 7 or 8 years ahead of us in making this argument. We're making it now through Scott Wiener and Tony Atkins, is that it will create affordable housing. By having as much housing as possible, you will create affordable housing. Vancouver is the reality, and it remained expensive. It is the second most expensive city in North America, and prices didn't go down a penny. The exact same, you can see right here, exact same price per square foot. And the evidence, he said, is indisputable. He's written a book about it called Sick Cities. This obsession with upzoning as if this is going to drive down prices, it drives them up. And the reason is that it causes vast increases in the land value. And once you have a really expensive piece of land, you cannot create affordable housing. And as he says in his podcast, and as he said last week, it's not the NIMBYs that are the problem at the very bottom there. It's the global increase in land value in urban areas that's the problem. And he is blaming it on upzoning. Upzoning creates unaffordability. It's just a bad idea, but it's gripping a lot of groups and people right now. It's popular. It's been popular for it's been popular in Vancouver for over a decade. In California, we picked up on it about 4 years ago with Scott Wiener. Okay, next, talk about where do we get affordable housing actually. Paul mentioned this. The only way to get affordable housing is actually to pay for it. It costs extra money to make affordable housing affordable. So this is a study of what's been going on in California for the last several years. And you can see that the lime, kind of that lime color, is what the goal was, that all the cities were ordered to come up with that much affordable housing, that lime block on the left side, very low and low income. How much did the cities come up with? Well, they came up with that little tiny aqua square there. Why? Because they don't have the money. The money is all in the state. The state has all of there's a tiny bit of money at the city level for affordable housing, but very little. It's always been that way. The state has the money. How much did they approve in market rate in the cities? Well, they were supposed to approve that lime square you see there, almost the same size as the very low and low income. They were supposed to have about the same amount of market rate. But the only thing that came before them that was proposed to them by developers was market rate. And so they approved far more market rate than we need. And we have a glut. And you have incredible people running around saying we don't have enough market rate. There is a major glut in California of market rate. Hollywood has a 10% vacancy rate, downtown vacancy rate. Well, of course, now since the COVID, people are abandoning San Francisco. It's got massive vacancy rates, but that's partly because of COVID. But I'm talking about pre-COVID, everybody. So we're talking about a complete lack of funding. Now I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, what happened? Where did the money go? Well, right after the crash in 2008, California almost went broke. And so in 2010, they voted to take back all of the money that the cities were being given for affordable housing. It was done through redevelopment agencies, which were not popular, but they did manage to build a lot of affordable housing. So Jerry Brown took away defunded affordable housing at the city level. He took it all back, put it into the budget, which was really hurting, and everybody sort of understood. But when the revenues surged back up, you can see the surge here on the aqua side, just went crazy, way up. That didn't get copied here. We had just a little tiny bit. This is something that was approved by voters right here. Voters approved some special money in 2018. So the state abandoned affordable housing funding. And as the years went on, they began to blame the cities more and more for not approving affordable housing. So it's been a kind of almost like a nightmarish situation where the cities are being blamed. Even the media sometimes blame the cities for not approving affordable housing. There isn't any money. They got, I'm going to say they got screwed, if you don't mind. Okay, a major hit on the environment. If you look at all of these kind of depressing things I've just shown you, I hate to say, in addition to all of these other problems, both of them were going to wreak destruction on the urban tree canopies across California. When we can't afford that, obviously we have heat islands, we're going to have major deaths in the next several decades. We're up in Los Angeles, as I understand it, they're expecting 2,000 deaths per year from the heat island effect, unless the city cools down. And the only way to there are two ways to cool down. And one is you have to rebuild your urban tree canopy. We're right in the middle of bills that are saying we're going to tear down the urban tree canopy. We're going to wipe it out. We're going to kill the yards, which are awful, elitist things. It's really incredible how interesting the spin is on this issue. So by destroying yards, we also pave over the permeable soil, and we set up a real problem with runoff and just incredible. It's hard to describe all the environmental disasters that can happen if we do this. Both SB 9 and SB 10 wipe out our defensible spaces between the buildings. And I'll go back to the Redondo Beach picture. This is going to be your defensible space between buildings. when they're done. And so it's incredible that the debate is not focusing on these real issues. A lot of burn areas, as I'm sure you know, big burn areas in the last couple of years are not inside the severe fire hazard zones that are often exempt from density. They're outside those zones. They've jumped the zones, they've jumped the freeways, and they've burned down to the oceans. So these kind of fire hazard zones are getting more and more meaningless. Now, the final thing is it attacks, SB 10 attacks this concept of voter-approved open space and protected lands. It's incredible that they're doing this, this isn't a front page story in the LA Times. It's hard. I mean, I kind of understand it because the newsrooms have been decimated and it's easy to pass complicated bills that are filled with lies because there's no media left in Sacramento. A very, very tiny group of people cover Sacramento. When I covered the Arnold era, there were 50 reporters regularly covering Sacramento. I think there are less than 10 now, and there's no way to keep up with what's going on. There are going to be 3,000 bills this year, and bad things are going to happen. So that's really depressing. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop the screen share. But it can be stopped, and there are a couple of good bills. SB 15 by Portantino is a very good bill, and I'm happy to answer questions about that later on. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jill. That was a great presentation, very informative, and raises a lot of questions. I think there are a lot of questions. I'm not sure if they're addressed to anyone in the that have come up in the chat. So perhaps if I ask everyone, let me see, I'm going to ask everyone to unmute. If that's okay, Jill and Paul, is that all right if I ask everyone to unmute so we can have a casual conversation among us?
Hey, it's fine, and I think either of us can take a shot at answering the questions.
Okay, that's great. And I would like to remind everyone that you're asked to limit your questions or your remarks to 2 minutes or less, so we can answer everyone's questions. So here we go. So you all are asked to unmute, and welcome to the conversation. Let's see, I have a question here. C.T. Williams, are you there?
Walter Lamb.
I'm sorry, try that again to unmute, please.
Hello.
There you go.
Okay. Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council, life member of Sierra Club. Only one real question for both Paul and Jill. What do you think of the current initial study and project description for the housing element upgrade by the City of Los Angeles, Department of City Planning?
Yeah.
That's it. What do you think about it?
I'm not sure that I can say I'm that up on it, so it's hard for me to offer an opinion yet.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I haven't read it yet. I know all of the cities are updating their housing elements, and they're being required to add massive amounts of density under what's called RENA. And there's a huge debate because the growth numbers have doubled, but the city of Los Angeles has stagnant population, as does most of California's urban areas. So there's a real battle going on as to why cities are being asked to double their zoning. I don't know anything about LA's specific housing element, but this war is unfolding.
Yesterday was the deadline for scoping comments. We were given 30 days, and the initial plan is out, so it's available. That's all.
Well, I'm sure my planning director has read it, but we haven't discussed it, and I haven't read it yet, honestly.
Tom, do you have any point of view on it? because I'm sure you responded.
Yes, piece of trash.
Tom, for all of you that don't know Tom's he's our oil and gas expert also. Plus he's an expert on all our CEQA issues, and he's a major stanchion for us for learning all about CEQA.
One of my backgrounds is I helped build, directed the building of 3,824 apartments in 3 calendar years and had 2-year waiting list. That's all.
You're our housing solution.
Tom, could you forward me this is Patricia speaking. Could you forward me those comments that you made, and I could forward them also to Jill and to Paul?
I will.
Thank you.
So this is Catherine Campbell speaking. I'm wondering if either of you have any examples that you can put forward as positive solutions for increasing both moderate and low-income housing in these scenarios. Jill, you mentioned that the state needs to at least return funding to the prior level, but are there any models that you've seen nationally or internationally for how to do that in a reasonable time frame that could make an impact on the kind of problems that we're experiencing in California?
I don't know that that's based on other places, but just on what's happening now, on talking to property owners, I think there are a number of office buildings that are vacant or fairly vacant that we may anticipate seeing developers convert to housing, and the effort to make that largely affordable would be an approach. Also, pushing for more development on commercial streets rather than disrupting neighborhoods. There are a lot of empty buildings right now, some that are 1 story that could be 3 stories in mixed use, or 4 stories on a commercial street, and add a number of units again without having to displace anyone or disrupt single family neighborhoods, or which the city already does in its TOC developments, demolish a rent controlled building and replace it with a new market rate building. And frankly, under the current circumstances, a developer could demo a building and build the exact same building. And because they'd get out from under rent control, and because the value that's attached to new construction, they would make a profit. So we incentivize demolishing older buildings where there are often people that can't afford a rent other than what they're paying now. But because of Costa-Hawkins, once they're out, no other apartment building, when it's vacated, even if it's almost exactly the same level of condition, the same number of years old, it's not going to be affordable. It's going to be now a luxury market rate rent. So that's something I would do. And I could see building a lot of affordable housing on abandoned mall sites. And I know malls are looking at a lot of housing in general. A number of them are looking at continuing to be malls, but eliminating maybe half the space and building housing. And so they have at least a built-in market of the people that live there as a base. So even though a number of people are using Amazon, if you live next door to all the things you want to shop at, you might just walk 50 feet and go shopping in a mall. So that change is happening, and we could encourage more of that housing to be affordable housing.
I'd like to weigh in and agree strongly with what Paul just said. And that's very similar to what Portantino is trying to do. It's not exactly the same, but it's reuse of existing buildings. Yeah. And I know that some of you have read the kind of infamous and famous study called The Greenest Building. And The Greenest Building is a study by the research arm of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, in which they found that the new luxury buildings suck up so much energy and have so much incredible supply line problems from far away places where the marble is cut and where the steel is made, and just goes on and on, that if you actually measure what you're doing to the environment when you tear things down and put in a brand new building, it's shocking amounts of greenhouse gases. And that's why the greenest building is a really wonderful study about, hey, take what you've got that is underutilized, that is empty, that is a mall, that is whatever, and rebuild it. And that's what Portantino's trying to do. His bill died in a committee, I don't remember when, last year. It didn't get the attention of the really horrible bills, but it's a smart bill about reusing existing idle buildings. So it's probably, it might not.
And it makes total sense under COVID. So even if someone acted like they had a good reason last year to oppose it, they might change their mind if we
maybe
nudge them.
So I think Paul's, right on target, I think, with what he's talking about.
I'd like to ask a technical question. The repurposing of offices, it's to me, it sounds like a very good idea. And if there's an owner, when you say repurposing, who's going to fund it? The owner, or will a developer come in and do it? And then will you still result in market price situations there?
Well,
what's the funding situation?
It could be either one, but unless someone provides extra funding for affordable housing, either the existing office building owner or a developer that buys it would put in as much market rate housing as they're legally allowed to. But I think it's an opportunity for the city to buy some of these buildings and create affordable housing. It's just a question of where the money comes from, and that's not easy.
Well, that's the question.
We have to count on some of it from the federal government, which.
Okay, yeah, that's the question. Where's the money coming from? Yeah, that's the big question. Yeah.
Suzanne, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'd like to throw in a couple of thoughts. For those who don't know me, I'm a social ethicist, analyst, and psychologist. And I'm focused on changing the conversation because we're busy fighting these two bills, and we have to on one hand. But on the other hand, I'd like to see us, and I have a draft of something I've done, but I need a draftsperson or architect to make it look beautiful. And found out it's being done in old Covina, an old part of Covina, and then another friend who's an arborist and from the Netherlands said, oh, we're doing stuff like that there, which piggybacks on what Paul Koretz said about the going into the upper levels, the 1 to the 3 stories. And if we could get this drawing, or maybe an even better one, that what I've conceptualized that would, reduce and reuse and actually add to the trees because of how the second story would be done. But if we could get that, and I know from my history in Culver City, first of all, our 5 council people, I feel, are very decent people. They're split down the middle between, pro and con on the housing thing, because the ones who really want it are really trying to address homelessness, which we realize is like the trickle-down economy. The trickle-down housing isn't going to provide what's needed. But if we can get something out to all of our activists that's hands-on, that's visual, so it moves from being abstract concept into something a council person can see and look at, and then back it up with bullets of things that both Paul and Jill have said, and start engaging in the conversation. And we also need to find a meme that moves away from, we're NIMBYs and all the nonsense that's going on psychologically, just as we got the meme going, because I told people to say ban fracking is never going to work. Paul Williams had said the only way oil leaves is when they have to pay. So we created the meme of we started with the $1 billion security bond, and we also started with 1,000-foot setback when SB 4 came out on the oil field and the dangers. And then when people bought into it, we raised it up to 2,500-foot setback because there was more science to back that, and the 2.5 billion. And people bought into that, and it gave us pushback, which we could do in Culver City, to demand that our health and our security, since it's seismic, et cetera, needed to be protected. So if we can use something like that where we get the positive meme and pictures and then start inundating to get across our narrative that, as Jill pointed out, the media has all but destroyed. So if someone can work with me who knows how to use AutoCAD or whatever, I'd love to at least get this out. Maybe somebody or others could even improve on it, that creates the recycling, the carbon, heat sinks, et cetera, and provides both really low income and, homelessness addressing, plus the more affordable and moderate. Thank you.
Suzanne,
this minute.
Thank you for that idea, and hopefully somebody online this evening will be able to meet your needs. I have a Joan Davidson asked, when land is so expensive.
Before the next question, can I just put in an off-topic thank you to Culver City for what they're doing in terms of trying to amortize their oil fields over the course of 5 years, because it'll blaze a trail for us where we've been getting advised that we would probably have to amortize things over 20 years, which I think is total BS, but it helps to have a city take the step ahead of us and will help us get to where we're trying to go.
Yes.
Great. Joan asked, when the land is so expensive in some cities, what builder can afford to build affordable housing?
Well, and I think the answer is that given the choice, they wouldn't. They would certainly build luxury housing and hope for the biggest profit possible.
Of course.
I'm hoping that we can do something with our zoning and look at ways to incentivize at least moderate workforce housing, which we also have a huge shortfall of. And it may take some subsidies, but I think if we find a way through zoning to make it more permissive to build more reasonably priced housing, that may be one way to do it.
Paul, can you talked about the city's general plans and that these bills overrode those, and how city's general plans were inclusive and developed with a lot of input. And I wonder if you can let us all know when the City of Los Angeles's general plan update is going to come back online in an inclusive, transparent way. It kicked off several years ago, and then the rug was pulled out, and now no one knows what's happening. Is that going to move forward again so that we have that to stand on rather than just saying that these general plans are important and inclusive and collaborative?
I would have to say that I do not know more than anybody else about when that will happen or if it will happen.
Are any council members looking to the planning department and asking them to please begin that process again, since it is so important to this very issue?
I think that's a very good question. I'm not sure if anybody is doing that, but I suspect based on your question that that will happen in the future. I'm not sure if Daniel Skolnick, my planning director, is on this call, but if he is, he might have more of an idea of whether this is moving forward at all. Daniel, are you there or are you not there? I guess he's not. But I will try to find that out if anything is in the works. I suspect it is not moving at any great pace. And with our budget shortfall, it's a good excuse for the planning department not to be doing that as well. So it's even less likely. But I think that's a good suggestion, and we will take a good look at it.
Can you hear me?
Oh, Daniel,
Hello?
Is that you?
Yes, it is. Sorry, I was having issues connecting. The community plan process is still happening, and there's still a number of plans that are being worked on. With COVID, it looked like the work program disappeared for a while, but it was still moving forward. And even though it's slowed down a bit, things are still happening. In fact, there's even a community plan going to commission this Thursday for Hollywood, although that's been in the works for many, many years now. So a little slow down, a little hiccup, but it's still happening, and the department's adapting.
I have a question. I have a comment. This is Kathy Knight, and I live in Santa Monica. And let me see, am I muted?
No, we can hear you.
Okay. And one of the things that we realized is that we elected some people to the city council that cared about the neighborhoods here. Finally, we got some good people on. And one of the things we realized is that the last one, the other bills that Weiner put through almost passed. It was so frightening how close it came. And that this time we really need to stop these bills in Santa Monica, we decided, at the committee levels, and not wait till there's a final vote. So our Santa Monica City Council sent a letter saying that we're concerned about these two bills and we don't support them the way they are. And so I just, personally, I want to say that we need to stop. We need to show the Senate and that there is not support for these bills way ahead of time, and not wait for the end of the line vote. And in terms of the Sierra Club, I think we haven't. I just want to make it clear. I don't think we've actually taken a stand at this point. Just so we know this, but this meeting is to educate everybody. And so I personally am really, really against this. It's my neighborhood is already changing from single family homes being torn down to mega mansion type things. And it's really sad. And anyway, I have a 1953 home, and the backyard is huge. And I just walk outside and look out, and I feel relaxed just looking out and just seeing nature. It's something we just need to keep for our kids, for our children. Okay, thank you.
Well, and I agree with you. And this time, rather than introducing a motion against SB 1120 months after it was introduced, again, because we were focused elsewhere, this year, almost immediately on the introduction of SB 9 and 10, I introduced a resolution to oppose it. The problem is that there certainly is a lot of support for developers on the LA City Council, so it takes a while to work our way past that to get bills, motions in opposition to bills like this. So we're on it, but I'm not sure how quickly it'll happen. I think the Sierra Club could do it more quickly.
Hey, Richard.
Thank you, Councilmember. Diane, if you could hold on. John Heath has had his hand up. John, do you have a question?
Sure. Thanks, Richard, and thanks to everybody for doing this. Thanks to Suzanne de Benedettis for inviting me. I'm the president of United Homeowners Association. We're the little unincorporated community right next to your favorite plot of land, the Inglewood oil field. And I was listening to, I think it was Tom that was speaking earlier, who's the oil and gas expert. We probably need to have a separate conversation because we had to file a sequel lawsuit to stop an 88-unit condo development right across the street from that little plot of land. So we'll follow up on that. But real fast, Councilmember Koretz and Jill, thanks for your insight as always. I wanted to ask the councilman, what's the chances of amending his resolutions, which we weighed in on in support of, and we're going to soon be encouraging the entire council to support those. I'm part of a group called United Neighbors, which is a coalition of homeowners groups across the region, and I'd encourage all of you to consider joining and supporting that effort. But what's the chance of amending those resolutions to remove the requirement that the mayor concur, so that once the city council adopts that, it would just be the policy of the city and you guys can go forward and go forth and send that to our friends in Sacramento? And then also, lastly, what, if any, benefit might there be in terms of pushing affordable housing to looking at repealing Article 34 from the California Constitution, which is a crazy holdover from days gone by when a bunch of white folks thought that they needed to stop public housing because they didn't want certain people living in their neighborhoods. Obviously, we have an affordable housing crisis, and whatever we can do to make it easier and less bureaucratic to build affordable housing, we should do it. Thoughts?
I'm not familiar with Article 34. What does it actually do?
That's the constitutional amendment that was adopted by a bunch of folks in the early 50s. It basically requires a public vote to be held whenever there's public housing. So anytime the city has a project that public funds is going into, there's some attestation or affirmation that has to be made that, you know, this many units is going against a certain allocation. I think the last time the city took that vote was in 2008. So they're reaching the end of their allotted public units. So that's something I think the mayor has been looking at, but that's Article 34.
And I don't think in our previous opposition to Scott Wiener's bills and others that the mayor caused any trouble for them. So it's very rare that he's overridden the council policy. I think it's happened once since I've been on council over the course of 2 mayors. So
I thought what happened before was that he didn't concur, and therefore there was no clear message coming from LA that this was the official position of the city. Maybe I misunderstood that.
I'm not aware of that, so I'll have to double check. I know there was an effort on a different bill by Wiener, which was the 4 a.m. bar bill, to allow bars in Los Angeles and a number of other cities to stay open till 4 a.m., which I thought was an equally bad idea, and led the opposition to that one. And to his colleagues, Scott Wiener said, because the mayor was supportive, that was why LA was included, but that was not the policy of the city of Los Angeles. That was just the mayor's. So I flew up a couple times to speak against it in committees to make sure they knew that the council was not in support of the bill. And the first year we were not in support, but in later years we were actually formally in opposition. So again, that can be confusing based on what the mayor's folks who do the lobbying for the city of Los Angeles are saying. So once in a while, we just have to go up and clarify it ourselves.
I wanted to say something about John's mentioning of 34. There is some talk, John, and John Heath is always ahead of the curve on this stuff. I don't know where what you read. He always knows stuff ahead of everybody else. But this 34 Article 34, it is from a really bad time in California, and it was a racist approach to stop public housing by requiring voter approval of public housing. And there's a lot of talk about getting rid of it now. I'm hearing a lot of chat about it. So maybe it'll come up this year. It's what the remarkable thing about what's going on under what I call the Wiener Inc. Situation is that the legislature is obsessed with market rate housing, and they have abandoned affordable housing. They're not focused, and they're just way off the chart. So it would be great if that discussion could come barreling in and pull them back into reality.
Well, thank you for that discussion. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
The next question is from Mel, and then Diane, if you have a question after that.
Oh, thanks. I just wanted to clarify for the council member and his planning staff.
Oh, okay, please do.
My question was not about the community plans, which I know are going forward, and I applaud the planning staff for managing that during this time. But it was about the general plan and the general plan elements that are aside from the community plans. And the process, as Jill knows, had begun, and then the rug was pulled out when it became too open and inclusive. And these are some critical elements that the state requires us to include by certain timelines in some cases that really do go to not only housing, but climate adaptation and just dozens of other things that we need to be taking seriously and planning in an inclusive way. And that's going to take time, and it's dormant. And I would really love to see some leadership on pushing planning to get that going again. Thanks.
And I was hoping to have Daniel answer that question as well. Our community plans are moving along, although from my point of view, at a kind of snail's pace for a variety of reasons. But where this one is going, I'm not familiar. That's why I want to give Daniel another chance to see if he's up on that more than I am.
Yes, this is Daniel Skolnick. There are in fact other elements of the community plan that are being worked on, such as the housing element, which was mentioned earlier. There's also the thought about opening up the framework element. But it's true that not every aspect of the general plan is being updated at this time, and it's really just a matter of funding and staffing, despite the fact that the City of Los Angeles has the largest planning department now in the nation. To update every element of the general plan at the same time would require probably a tenfold increase in staff. It's not something that the city could do at this time without an enormous infusion of state and federal funding to do so. But little by little, it hopefully will get updated. It just will take time.
Great. Just look for our LA 2040 plan that begun and then got killed, and push to move that forward. Thanks.
Okay. Mel, do you have a question? Mel, can you unmute? I'll come back to you, Mel. Catherine, do you have a question?
Yeah, if you guys don't mind me changing topics just a little bit, it's germane to this group. Jill, you've spoken or written in the past about LA's urban canopy and where we stand relative to some other more progressive cities. I'm wondering if there's anything developing either in terms of organization initiatives or legislative initiatives that you're aware of that would give us hope that someone's paying attention to improving the way we manage the urban canopy in the greater LA area.
Well, this week, a major deadline ended for weighing in on the city's approach to the urban tree canopy. I can't give you much detail because I've been jumping in and out of that topic and I'm not up to date. But I can tell you that Los Angeles is probably in 20th or 30th or 40th place among the major cities in America for protecting its trees. Santa Monica is a really interesting example of a place with tons of development. And in the most recent full year, they only allowed 3 trees to be killed while they did all of this because they use the Seattle approach, also known as the Melbourne approach, where every tree is protected while they build. Los Angeles still allows mature trees worth tens of thousands of dollars and sucking up all sorts of smog to be cut down for temporary equipment storage during a project, and other outrageous things have been abandoned 15, 20 years ago in Seattle, Austin, different places. Melbourne is the top city in the world for protecting its canopy. It's just got a nasty heat problem there. So I would say the current administration from the mayor's office is weak, very weak on this. And even though I wrote some very critical things of Villaraigosa while he was doing his million tree project, he actually did a much better job, even though he was always bragging that he'd done more. He actually did a much better job. It's shocking, but he did.
We also have had an opportunity to make things worse with one of our programs, which is as a result of a good lawsuit against us. we committed to putting in at least $25 million every year for the next 25 years to repair our sidewalks. But in many cases, to actually remove and replace a sidewalk, you would have to wind up killing a tree. And so I've tried to get the city to adopt a more tree-focused approach where if they absolutely couldn't cut off part of the roots where the sidewalk is, that they'd make the sidewalk meander around the tree area. And I've been pushing that for a while. I don't know how well we've implemented it. But certainly if we don't do that, we have the potential to take down hundreds, if not thousands of trees, if not tens of thousands of trees, as we replace that much sidewalk over the next 25 years. And that alone could massively damage our urban canopy. We're also in the process of inventorying all the trees in the city, which will make it easier for us to track them and preserve them. So that's a couple of things. I've also been pushing for us to add some trees to our list of protected trees, which is also pretty weak. So there are a lot of things we could do beyond that. I think we are one of the weakest cities in tree protection of major cities, but several of us, Bob Blumenfield as well, are pushing to improve that.
Well, I know just in the Marina Del Rey area, it comes up every year, super aggressive trimming and, declaring trees as, dead or dying without having real independent arborists making that assessment. So perhaps it's something that the Marina group could take up in the future, whether or not there's a resolution or something we could do to bring a little bit more attention to the local tree canopy issues.
Thank you, Catherine. Diane? Let's see, Diane, can you unmute? Here, let me see if I can help you. Try it now.
Okay. Hi, Councilman Koretz. Thank you, both of you, for this very important conversation. I think at some point you spoke as if and I wondered if you were talking about the full council is sort of on board with the way you're thinking, or are you the Lone Ranger here in thinking about these issues? Because I'd love to think that the council is in agreement with you, or at least many of them are.
I knew where we were last year. We've had a number of changes in council members. My best ally on this issue was David Rue, who I've worked closely both on tree issues and wildlife corridor issues in the hills that we share. I think his replacement is much more open to the trickle down, build lots of luxury housing approach. I think generally not that atypical of younger folks who would just assume that if you build more housing, it'll allow them to live in Los Angeles where it's not affordable otherwise. So I don't know with this council where the majority is. It took a while with the last council. So I can't predict. I'm certainly not a Lone Ranger. There are certainly some others that feel strongly about this issue, and the rest of the council, it's a question of whether we can pull them along or not. I think with a lot of pressure from neighborhood councils and maybe the Sierra Club and homeowners associations, that we'll have the ability to get this through again.
Mm-hmm. Good, thank you.
Okay. Well, we're coming towards the end of our meeting. So Congress member Koretz, thank you so much for providing us with
Congress
all of
member,
this,
woohoo!
With all of this
take the promotion, but I don't have it yet.
And Jill, thank you also for being a part of this conversation and providing us with your your knowledge and expertise in this as well. We always appreciate your being with us. There are just a couple of things to close. We appreciate all the hard work you both do for Los Angeles and for all of us. And I'd like to remind everyone here that Sierra Club has not taken a position on the legislation that we've been talking about tonight, just so we're clear about that. So with that, we're ending our meeting. We will keep you posted. The Airport Marina Group will keep you posted as to our future projects and future meetings. We're looking forward to seeing you again, and we'll let you know as soon as we know. So may everyone be safe and secure and healthy, and may you all live in peace.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you everybody for having us.
Thank you.
May
It's
organic
our pleasure.
peaches be with you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.